good evening, everyone. Those who were with me last year might remember that I said that 2022 was the best year ever for moths. Well, 2023 wasn't, but it was really very notable for a lot of reasons, and I hope to tell you all about those. Moths were rarely out of the news. You could hardly pick up a newspaper without it being full of moths. And at Christmas time, we all headed off and got Tesco stuffing mix. So to try and breed moths out of this, didn't we? And then shortly after that, we all held off to get organic crackers to try and find moths out of that. Moths are often in the press in a sort of deleterious connotation, aren't they, really? But by far the biggest moth story of the whole year, which I'm quite sure as all you Daily Star readers are well aware of, was this one, in that Jamie Dornan, who we meant to call Hunk Jamie Dornan, he was playing golf in Portugal. He was rushed to hospital with a suspected heart attack because a giant caterpillar tried to kill him. Well, and there we are. It's a picture of giant caterpillar. It's at least as long as his arm, isn't it, there? In real life, it's 1.25 inches long. It's an oak processionary moth caterpillar. But the Daily Star doesn't let facts get in the way of a good story, does it? Anyway, I'm sure that you'll all have gone straight to page 9 for more details and found out that men in their 40s had nearly died having had heart attacks. And these nasty caterpillars have been suspected of killing people's dogs. Really quite extraordinary. I don't tell you this for mere frivolity. I tell you all this for a very genuine reason, because in a moth trap in August, south of Scarborough, disappeared. And this is Yorkshire's first oak processionary moth. It's not a pale legger, it's an oak processionary. We've had the larvae on trees, which are imported trees, which have been swiftly dug up and burnt, but this is the first adult. So I don't know if any golfers listening, but if you're playing in the Scarborough area next year, you feel a quickening of the pulse and a tightening of the chest, don't worry, it's not a heart attack, it's just a giant caterpillar trying to kill you. Anyway, I think we ought to get on with the more serious stuff. And you'll all want to know what's happened to all these records that you've sent me this year. Well, you haven't sent me quite so many. I expected at least 250,000 records this year. And look, there's a drop. There's a drop of 30,000. Where have they all gone? We've had more recorders. We've had 780 people have sent in records this year. A phenomenal number, but the numbers have gone down. So why? So I had a look at previous years. And if you look at previous years and look at the number of records per month, you get a graph like this. I could have chosen any year. You always get this peak in July. July is the month for moths. What happened in 23? Well, this happened. We didn't get a July peak. June was tremendous, more than usual in June. August was okay, but we were 30,000 down in June, and that's where the 30,000 was. But why? Why are we 30,000 short in July? Well, there are two possible reasons, aren't there? The first is the weather in July was not good. We had a wonderful June, lovely, hot and sunny. We had a nice August after the first week, but June was wet and dreary and cold and not good for moth trapping. So that's probably one thing to do with it. The second thing, and this is a slide I showed last year, 2022, that's what your lawns looked like. It was incredibly dry. Now, all these moths flying around in July all have larvae wanting something to feed on in August. And if this is all they've got to feed on, they're not going to do very well. So I think larval mortality is probably a lot to do with this. I can't prove it, but this might be the bigger reason than the actual poor weather in July. We had 9 county records this year. Sounds a lot. Is that normal? Is it more or less than we expect? Well, we'll come back to this. 61 vice county records. I'd love to tell you about all of these. If I was going to do that, I think I'd be here for about 4 hours. So I won't do that. We should be finished inside the hour. We've had nearly 2,700 10-kilometre square records. That's actually slightly down from the year before, but it's still a colossal number. And this number really should fall with more people trapping moths, because you can only find 200 10-kilometre squares for large yellow underwing and dark arches and brimstone. So when you've got those, you can't get any more. But still, this is a colossal number of moths, of dots on the map. So 9 county records. When was the last year we didn't have a new species in the county? You might like to think and just have a little guess. Well, the answer is 1966. We've had new species every year since then. And in those days, 60s, 70s, you'd expect about 3 new ones a year. Now you'd expect about 9. So it's about average this year. Now, what I've done with this graph is take out those species which I knew were already in the county. So things like the 2 species of goat spot, which haven't been identified. The different common rustics haven't been identified. So this is genuine new species. Now, some of this can be explained by increased observer efforts, and there are more recorders about. You're going to pick up the more rare migrants, perhaps more people looking for these things at Spurn, but most of these are genuine residents. So the rate of colonisation of the county has increased, which is really quite interesting. County records, 9 of them. Let's look at the 3 micros, say 3 macros. Pretty marble. That was an unusual one. Deltoti deceptoria. Deceptoria because it deceives you. It deceives you thinking that it's a tortrix moth because it's a little thing. Deltoti, that's the same genus as marbled white spots. It's related to silverhook and things like that. This is a really, really rare migrant. These maps I'm going to show, and I'm showing quite a few of these are available on the Gloucester Branch Butterfly Conservation website. They've been created by Guy Meredith, who's interrogated the NBN Gateway Atlas, which has now been populated with National Moth Recording Scheme data for macros up to the end of 2019. So they're 3 years more accurate or more up to date than the maps in the Macro Moth Atlas. So pretty marble. There are lots of migrants called marble with marble in the name. So this is unrelated to any of them. It's nothing like shiny marble and all these other things. This moth was resident in Kent down here in the 1940s and then disappeared. And since then, it's occurred as a very, very rare migrant. So that was a really good thing to turn up. The other 2 macros, I expected. We've been predicting these for a little while. The first one's Clancy's rustic, which first appeared in the country in 2002 on the south coast as a migrant. And it spread along the south coast and it's moved northwards. To interpret these dots, red dots are the 5 years up to 2019. The blue dots are the 5 years before that. Black dots are the 5 years before that. So red is recent, blue is fairly recent, and black is a little bit older. Little black dots are very old. So Clancy's rustic, I expected this to turn up at Spurn. I've been predicting this for a year or 2 and always got it wrong. And then Alan Ronda's got it at Ford Chalk Blank. Well done, Alan. We'll see more of this because it's a polyphagous thing. It feeds on all sorts of things. It's a bit like pale mottled willow, isn't it? So the next macro that got to us was oak rustic, and that turned up at Spurn. And this is another fairly new colonist to the country. The first one appeared in 1999, and it's become resident on the south coast, and it spread north. And since this 2019 map, it spread even further. And one turned up at Spurn, as I say, in October. Now, oak rustic, so it feeds on oak, but it doesn't feed on all oaks. It just feeds on evergreen oak, so home oak. So the spread of this thing is going to be limited by its food plants. We're going to see more, but it's not going to spread quite as rapidly as it might do because the incidence of home oak is a lot more to our south and east. So that's the macros. Micros, the first one of these, Pediasia fashioninella. These maps are from the new Pirelli book, which you should all have a copy of because it's tremendous. And the authors of the book say that it's resident in East Anglia here. And all these other dots are migrants or wanderers or vagrants. And this is one of the few micros with a sensible vernacular name. It's dune grass moth. It feeds on seaside grasses. Whether we'll see more of this, I don't know. But note the date, 12th of June, and that's important because everything happened about this time. The next one, the following day, Anania stachydalis is another one that Alan's got at Wycombe Causeway. This is a moth of the southwest. We didn't really expect it to come our way. 13th of June, Did it come across the North Sea like a lot of other things did do at this time of year? It's very like Canadian coronata. In fact, that's coronata on the right and stachydalis on the left. They're incredibly similar. There are differences in the pattern of the dots, particularly in the costal area of the forewing up here. But it ain't easy. The next one was this thing, Cydia ilutana, and it shows the value of trapping in woodland where nobody has ever trapped before. And Paul Fletcher's been trapping in no relation, trapping in Morby Far Wood. It's the top left-hand bit of VC61, so it's there where my cursor is. And he came up with this and had the good sense to keep it because he didn't know what it was and he thought it looked odd. Now, this has only been seen in the country since 1975 and it's spreading. We've only got this lousy old Vice County map to show, but it gives you an idea of where it's been seen. And it's like a dirty version of Cydia coniferana because ilutana means smeared or unwashed, which is a bit unkind on the poor moth. Now, that's coniferana on the right and that's ilutana on the left. And they really are quite similar. I think coniferana is a bit pretty. The pattern of the costal striguli is quite different when you look at it. They're in pairs in conifera, two, 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 and they're more evenly spread out here in Ilutana. And if you go back to the picture, you can tell that that pattern is Ilutana. We had to dissect this. Robert Woods dissected it just to be sure. It was Ilutana. And this is a larch feeding thing. Coniferana feeds in pine. So you need to trap in larch plantations. Nobody ever does. And there are all sorts of really nice larch feeding moths that you might be able to find. The next one, oh dear, this one, Blastobasis vittata. We're all used to Blastobasis lacticolella, aren't we? And Adostella. This is a third one in the county, I'm afraid. In some parts of the country, it's quite common. And it's common in Scotland, in Fife. Those two pictures are from Fife. It's like a little Adostella. It's smaller than Adostella generally. And it often has this chestnutty brown coloration, like in the top picture. Or other times it can look like the bottom one, which looks to me just like Adostella. Really. Now, we found this at Nosterfield, and I didn't immediately recognise it as a blastobasis. When I got dissecting it, I realised what it was. And they're very difficult things to dissect because the genitalium of all these blastobasis species is just the same. We had to get a second opinion and a third opinion and a fourth opinion in the end, but they all agreed with us that it was vittata. And then this bottom dot, John Cooper got one a couple of months later at Bramley. So this thing is in the county, and it's a lot more common than we realised. I've had two records of moths which weren't unfortunately kept, and they were from the Wakefield area, and I put a fiver on each of those being vittata, particularly the right-hand one. It just doesn't look right for Adostella for me. So have an open mind on some of these Adostellas, particularly if they're little, particularly late in the year, because vittata can go on quite late in the year, and you're unlikely to get Adostella in October and November, but you might get vittata. The next one, we get a lot of new coleophas for the county, don't we? Again, we've only got this lousy Vice County map, but it shows where it occurs. It's a moth of the southeast of the country. And the larvae form these cases on blue fleabane. Now, this turned up at Spurn, and Tony Broom realised that this was a slightly funny-looking coleophora. They get lots of odd coleophas at Spurn, but there's something about this that made him keep it, and he gave it to Jim Morgan, who dissected it, and thought, crikey, what on earth's that? And it's squamosella, our first one ever. And blue fleabane isn't the commonest plant in Yorkshire, but there is enough about, and we might get more of this. And it's a nice case to look for. Here's the case on the seed head of blue fleabane, which you can find later in the year. So that's a really good one to look for. Phyllonericta comparella. Phyllonerictas form blister mines, don't they, on broadleaf trees usually. This is a map from the National Leaf Miner Scheme, so it's a few years out of date, and it may have spread a bit since then. It's what I've been expecting for a few years now. The larvae form mines on white poplar and grey poplar, not so much on black poplar. Now, these were found on white poplar, Potterick Carl, not Poplar Carl, and they were bred through. Harry Berman got this, and Ian Heppenstall got it. And that's a picture of the adult when it pops out. It's not the world's greatest photo, is it? But it's unlike any other Phalaenoptera species. That's what it should look like. It's a strange looking thing, and you can't mistake that for any other Phalaenoptera species. You should breed these out, because the only thing I've seen like this on poplars is some of the willow feeders, which can occasionally jump and use other food plants. When we get more used to it, we might be able to accept reptiles without breeding them out, but not at the moment. Vice County records, we've far too many to list, but there have been some quite amazing Vice County records. So instead, we're going to talk about June, this amazing second week in June. Rannoch looper. Rannoch looper is a resident moth in Scotland, in the north of Scotland, where it exists in woodland, in open woodland. Now, once every blue moon, an influx hits us from across the North Sea, and all these blue dots down here are an influx from 2011. It completely bypassed Yorkshire. We were left out, but there were thousands in the south of the country. Now, it has been seen in Yorkshire. This dot is from a Rothamsted trap in 1950 something in Harrogate, in Channel. There's an old dot dot on the map. 19th century dots aren't shown on this map, but there's an old one in Porrick from Scarborough. So we have got two old records. But on the 11th of July, it turned up at Spurn. Amazing. And then two turned up at Muston, further up the coast. And the next day, I got one in my moth trap. I couldn't believe it. And more turned up. And over the next few days, they kept coming and they kept coming. And we got all these records. And that was what I got. And we got another one. And Samantha Batty, I got two in a moth trap, unheard of, in Austerfield down here. Then Luke Jackson at Murfield got three together. It was absolutely extraordinary. And by the end of the day, by the end of the week, we had 27 records of 31 moths from 21 sites. Now, if you look at this distribution, they've all come in from the northeast and headed southwest. And we got far more than our fair share. I know there was one in Durham. There was the odd one that got as far as Lancashire. There'll have been some in the counties to our south. But we put right the wrongs from 2011. Quite extraordinary. And this was the weather pattern at the time. The nights leading up to it, northeasterly winds. This was the night they arrived, 11th of July, northeasterly winds. And that's the direction they've come from. And that's, although it wasn't the only moth that did this at this time. Eudonia delanella. That's another, well, we hate Eudonias and Stopparias, don't we? Because they all look just the same, and nobody, I can't tell them apart half the time unless they're really fresh. But delanella, you've got a fighting chance with, because it does actually look different. Now, the last one in Yorkshire was in 1904, and then this turns up at Spurn. Again, it's the night before the Rannoch loopers. A few nights after, beautiful brocade turns up at Spurn, the first one in the county since 2010. A real turn. The same time, satin wave turns up. Only two previous Yorkshire records, 1978 and 1996. And then we get this one. You have to be careful with all these waves. Waves are harder. Really, but there's no doubt this is satin wave and it's a fresh thing. And there's possibly another one, but I never saw the photo. But the third one turned up in August. Now, this is a second brood, and the second brood is slightly different. It's smaller. Did it stay on and breed? Are we going to have resident satin wave in the county now, or was this just a one-off? A moth trapper from north of Nottinghamshire, right here, contacted me at the end of May and said there's a charge of the light brocade going. And he'd got one in his moth trap. And he said, Samantha Bash is going to get on at Austerfield here next week. I don't know how he knew that, because she did. And then Martin Priestley got here at Bradford. And this is the Broughton Hall Rewilding Project. And Alistair Driver got one. 3 records of light brocade. And again, this is a moth that we've not seen since 2010. Very few county records. And 3 turn up in virtually no time at all. Quite extraordinary. Reddish light arches is one of these many species where there's a population in the Morecambe Bay area. And I've always wondered if one might just sort of stray across to VC64 from there. or whether one might guess come from the south, from Lincolnshire. This used to be resident in the county, and the records from the Wolds here, the last one was 1983. But this year, there were some southerly winds a week or so later, 10 days later. And on the night of the 23rd, some good, quite strong southerly winds, and a load of reddish light arches turned up, not just one, but 5 separate sites. And here we are, reddish light arches. And that was one from Humbermy Gap. That's a lovely fresh one, isn't it? And then when you get sent pictures like that, it's wonderful. This is one from Swinefleet from Mike Pulsworth. It shows a reddish light arches, and it shows light arches, the confusion species, next to it. That's what you should do when you take a vintage. Send a picture like that, full marks for that one, and it shows how different the two species are. Quite different wing markings. A reddish light arches is a smaller thing, isn't it? And light arches has got this bit of a crest. So that's really quite impressive. And the first in the county since the 1980s. Now, will they stay on, or is that just a flash in the pan? Moths don't just approach from over the North Sea or from the south. They can attack us from any angle. Now, there are a lot, as I said, of moths which occur in the Morecambe Bay area, and blossom underwing is one with a resident population. Its red dots are resident blossom underwings. We think of blossom underwing as a migrant, and we've had records. There was a migrant surge across a bit of the country in 2009. We got 2 at Spurn, we got another dot here. There was a migrant influx in 2014. That's one we got in Musterfield. Undoubtedly migrants. But this year, John Perry at Ingleton gets one of these garden trap on the 15th of April. Now, John is exactly there. He is, you forget how far west VC64 goes. It goes not that far from Morecambe Bay. So this is our first homegrown blossom underwing, which is really, I find, quite exciting. So have we got a population in the area? Was it blown across? It wasn't a night of westerly gales, so it could be breeding in Yorkshire. Who knows? And it wasn't the only one. Great prominent is a moth that used to occur in Yorkshire. There are old records in Porritt that don't show on this map. That's a 1942 record from Buttercrown Woods. Hasn't been seen since. That occurs very close to our border. Now, Rebecca Frost is trapping at High Bentham. High Bentham is precisely there, 1 10-kilometre square to the right of this one, and she gets a great prominent in the trap. So the first one seen in the county since the 1940s. Absolutely fantastic. How many more species are there? There are other species, things like square spot. Are they going to come across next? Is this just a one-off? Did this one just appear in winds? Winds were in the northwest that night, so there could have been a bit of wind assistance. Who knows? Wasps can approach us from the north. This is one that I bet you didn't expect. Saxon, it's a Scottish moth, isn't it? Or Northumberland. There are records in Durham. This dot is Weardale. It's been seen in Weardale since 2019. So imagine that dot's a red dot. Now, that's Weardale. Teesdale, and the Tees, of course, is a boundary between BC 65 and 66, is here. So it doesn't have far before it gets to Teesdale. Now, a visiting moth trapper was at Rommelkirk, and he sent me a picture. And he says, I think I ought to send you a picture of that because I don't think it's very common in. Well, I think he had his tongue firm in his cheek. Not very common. I mean, this moth hasn't been seen in Yorkshire since Porritt's time. There are very old 19th century records. And this is in Upper Teesdale. And it wasn't a night of northerly winds. It was a night of southerly winds. Sensational stuff. What else occurs in Upper Teesdale? You just don't know, do you? What about dark tussock? I bet you anything dark tussock is up there, because dark tussock is in Weardale, we know. What about northern arches? What about northern dart even? There could be anything up there. People don't know. There's not enough trapping goes on. And that's just the macros. What unknown micros are there? Amazing. A lot of moths have been increasing their range. Now, when a moth moves into an area, it usually moves in 3, 4, 5 kilometres a year. Is a sort of standard rate. Some a little bit less than that, some inch the way forward, some go forward a bit faster. Some do it incredibly rapidly. Now, this is a slide I showed last year, Clifton Nombre. I got really excited about that. Look at the graph. Instead of 3 records in 2021, 14 records in 2022. And I went on about all these wonderful red dots and how it might possibly, if we were really lucky, even be breeding in the south of the county. Wind on a year, and the graph looks the same, doesn't it? But this is an exponential graph in a true meaning of the word exponential. 48 records of Clifton Nonpareil. And look at this. Now, this isn't a map of a migrant species. A migrant species, the dots are evenly distributed across the county. This isn't. This is a picture of a resident species because the distribution has an edge. Look, there's an edge up here. People to the north and the west don't get it. People to the south and the east do get it. Extraordinary. And they kept coming. I got one in my garden. I couldn't believe it. And more came. And Andrew got 2 in a trap. How dare you? And then Andy Nunn got 3 in a single trap in Skidby. Now, nobody's speaking to Andy now. Which is poor Andy. 3 in a trap. Now, what's going to happen next? This is undoubtedly residency. And the residency has been meteoric. And those who have read Entomologist's record this last year will have read the article that suggests it's resident in the south of Scotland. Now, people said to me jokingly last year, well, Clifton Nonpareil is going to become as common as red underwing, ha ha. Well, 48 records of Clifton Nonpareil in 2023, 133 of red underwing. It's catching it up. Join me next year, we'll see if it has done. Chocolate tip. This is last year's map of chocolate tip. Been in the county 10 years or so. It's heading forward at a quite decent rate of 5 kilometres a year. You can plot exactly where it's going to be from year to year. And last year I said, well, I'm sat here. I'm confident I will see chocolate in 3 years' time in 2026. Well, just to prove how little I know about moths, this is what's happened. It's gone forward that much in 1 year. Okay, yes, I've got it. It's gone past me. All these records at the northern end of its range, and that's gone forward 10, 15, 20 kilometres. Right, extraordinary. That's the number of records, however. The number of records has fallen. It's gone down from 90 to 72. Why? If you look at this map, it really is rather interesting in that at the bottom of the range, there are not as many dots as you think. At the top of the range, there are a vast number of dots. Why? Now, I think there's a reason for this, in that I think this means that its parasitoids, the things that control its numbers, have caught up with it in the south. And in the north, it's parasitoid free. They haven't caught up with it. And so it can do what it likes up here, and it can breed merrily, and there's nothing controlling its numbers. That's my theory. And I've seen that before with quite a few moths. And the thing that really brought this home to me is with obscure wainscot, which moved into my area. We got it at Nosterfield, and 1 year we got 80 in a couple of traps in Nosterfield reed bed. Everybody else was catching 1 or 2. Since then, we've just caught 1 or 2. So the numbers were unchecked, and then suddenly they're checked. So that's my theory. Least carpet has been in the county for quite a few years now. This is last year's. And it's spreading quite nicely, not desperately fast, but it's spreading, perhaps 10 kilometres a year across the county. And I'm sat here thinking, it might be 2 or 3 years, and I should get that really, all being well. So what's happened in 23? That's happened. It turned up at Foxglove Covert here at Catterick, the MOD Nature Reserve. A huge jump. The following day, 3 days later, it turned up in Upper Teesdale at Cotherstone. Peter Webb got that. Absolutely extraordinary. So a huge increase in both the numbers and range of least carpet. Nearly 40 records last year. What's going to happen with that one? Well, time will tell. Dwarf cream wave is a moth of the south and east of Yorkshire. In the east of VC63, it's a not uncommon creature. At Spurn, it's not uncommon. It turns up occasionally at other places. Fairburnnings area, get it. It's not one I expected to find in my garden trap here. First for VC65. The following day, it turns up at Stokesley. Stokesley, ridiculous. What's he doing up there? You look at the number of dwarf green waves, we're up over 100 records now. So something strange has happened with that. White point is another one of these so-called migrants, which is undoubtedly resident in the county. It's been resident in the Spurn area, east of VC61, really for a few years. But last year we came to the conclusion it was resident over a bigger area. This year, look at all those dots and look at the number of records, over 100 records of white point. It's not moving west yet, is it? That's interesting. It will do, I would have thought. And a colossal increase. A lot of people have seen white point for the first time this year. And if you're worried you might mistake it for clay, you won't. It looks quite different. Now, delicates, delicates are migrants, isn't it? We all know delicates are migrants, but is it? It is undoubtedly resident to our southeast. But this has been a very interesting year. Look at the number of delicate records, over 50. Now, you get records up here at Hunter, which are migrants, of no doubt this is probably migrants. This lot here, I strongly suspect, are residents. It's just got that look about it. And okay, why would there be such a big migrant surge? It wasn't a great migrant year. It didn't arrive with a lot of other migrants. So something odd is happening with delicates. Browntail isn't a migrant. So we're not talking about migrants now, but browntail is very interesting. It's not a moth that you would think of being interesting, would you? Because it's a moth of VC61. And it sits in VC61, and its numbers build up at Spurn now. And then they go down again. Nothing exciting happens. You get the odd inland record, don't you? I'm an inland record skeptic for browntail because a lot of these are from fairly inexperienced recorders or their old records. And yellowtail can have a mucky tail sometimes, can't it? Convince you it's browntail. This year, there were one or two inland records. I thought, oh, that's a bit odd. A couple of these are from recorders that I trust, but perhaps they got it wrong. And then I got all the records in at the end, and we got all those. I thought, well, that's interesting. And then I was just looking at these, and they're all the same date. They're all the 7th of July. One or two were 8th of July, but they're all at the same time. Very odd. So I looked at browntail at Spurn, and on the 7th and 8th of July, numbers shot up to levels not seen since 2012, and then immediately shot down again. And at the same time, look at the wind pattern. The wind was in the southeast on the night of the 7th of July. So it's blown this lot inland. And not only that, this record, I think it's this one or that one, where Sam Newton was looking for larvae. He found larval webs in early September of browntail. We've never had inland larval webs. So it stayed on and bred. Now, is it going to stay on and breed even more? Watch this space. Box tree moth is the biggest mover when it comes to microbes. Look at all those records of that. It hasn't been in the country, in the county, long at all, has it? And again, that's an exponential rise. We've gone from just over 100 records to 500, over 500 records, not moths. If you're looking at moths, it's about 1,500 moths, and it's just turned up everywhere. We wrote in the 2022 report, there are no larval records of box tree moth yet in the county. What a difference a year, mate. We've had loads. I suspect I'm probably the only person in Yorkshire who has never seen a box tree moth. I've had the pheromone of me go, and they're not attractive, but everybody else has had. Toadflax brocade has had a really good year. For the last year or two, it's been confined to the Doncaster area, where they've had lots of records in the Doncaster area. One or two elsewhere, but it sat there in VC63. This year it's been on the move. David Baker got the first one for VC64 and his moth trap in Scarborough. And then this dot is somebody in Leeds who's got it. So watch out for that. It's heading in your direction. Maiden's blush numbers have slightly fallen. A lot of things, of course, have fallen this year. This might partly be the July effects. But I sat here last year and I said, well, all this lovely woodland in the south of VC62, Maiden's blush is going to colonise this year. It's going to move. But again, I don't know anything about moss, and it ignored me. And Maiden's blush has moved west. Why has it moved west? All these completely new dots here. Ingleton again. Everything's happening in Ingleton, isn't it? But quite can't explain that. And you haven't been blown there on easterly winds this time. And there's a line, it's afraid to cross this line. It's, I don't know, been watching Game of Thrones and it won't cross the wall or something. Something odd's happening with Maiden's Blush. But there's still a lot of them about. Now, this used to, of course, be a really rare moth 15 years ago. Let's talk about migrants. It wasn't a great migrant year. However, there were things of interest. 36 records of convolvulus hawk moth is a lot. They were mostly coastal. A lot of scarce bordered straws. Quite a few of those were inland. I didn't get one, but everybody else did. A lot of records of vestal. That's 24 is more than we expect, and quite a few of those were inland. I did get some of those. I didn't get a gem. We very rarely get double figures in gems. So this species did well, but a lot of species did very badly. Rush veneer, 10 records. I normally get 10 in my own garden trap. I didn't see it last year. Extraordinary. 2 records of bedstraw hawk moth. I mean, that often rivals convolvulus, but I don't know where they all were last year. 1 record of bordered straw. A lot of people tried to send us records of bordered straw, but the vast majority were typos for barred straw. We got alert to that in the end. Not a single record of small mottled willow. We always get small willow, don't we? Do you remember all the locks of Steegy Sticky came this last year? It was a huge influx. None this year, not one. Green oak tortrix, surely that's not a migrant. Well, some years it can be. And we're back to July the 11th again, that amazing day when all the rannoch loopers appeared. This is the number of Tortrix viridana we got this year, 450 records. Again, that's not individual, it's 1,500 individuals or 1,900, so it's a lot. And that's the normal flight time phenogram of Tortrix viridana. It inhabits oak woods in June and July. Always the same every year. This year, this big influx in the second week in June. And it turned up everywhere. And of course, these northeasterly winds blew them in across the North Sea. And I've never seen a map like it. A lot of people had never seen green oak tortrix before, and people are getting them in huge numbers. Keith Clarkson at Hummonby Gap reported 300 stranded on the tide line, a moth wreck, and people got huge numbers. Really strange. We certainly don't think of this as a migrant, do we? In fact, I bet most of you have never even heard of it. Neococulus moleculare. It's only been in the county since 2019, and it's just sat there and very few records. But we got a couple extra records this year. Aidan Smith got the first one here for VC64 in Otley back in July. And we thought, oh, that's great, it's moving a bit, and thought nothing of it. And then in the middle of August, it was about the 23rd of August, suddenly it appeared everywhere, and we kept catching it, and we got it in the middle of an oak wood in the middle of Upper Nidderdale. Now this thing feeds on bristly ox tongue. It doesn't occur in the middle of oak woods. I got it in my garden. There's no bristly ox tongue anywhere near me. Quite extraordinary. It kept coming and it kept coming. We got more and we got more, and there were records put on our records labelled Cocculus hybridella, but it wasn't. It was this thing. It was molecularna. Which reminds me, I showed a picture to good old OBS Identify. I took a picture of one I got from 3 different angles, and OBS Identify looked at it and pontificated. Oh yes, 100% I know what that is. I mean, it's often really good on obscure tortrixes, but it came up with 3 different species with 100% accuracy. One of them was molecular. Ah, bless it. So do be careful with OBS Identify. And that's bristly ox tongue, which is the food plant. It's quite a distinctive thing. But the best migrants, and possibly moth of the year, was, of course, this oleander hawk moth. Now, this is a sort of moth. If you catch this in your moth trap, you never need to trap again. You can hang your moth trap up, put your feet up, because you've done it. This is the ultimate. This is a holy grail of moth trapping. Not seen in Yorkshire since 1977. It's a sort of moth that, by any rights, should be caught by a long-standing, hard-working moth trapper such as me. But unfortunately, it wasn't. It turned up in a lady's moth, not in a moth trap, in a garden, up in the Dales in Dent. dent, for goodness sake. Now, the first thing you think of when you get a moth like this, an exotic hall moth, is, oh, somebody's been releasing them, because you can buy the eggs and the larvae and the pupa online. But this lady knows all her neighbours. I mean, everybody knows everybody in Dent, and she assures me that that wouldn't take place. And this is in the middle of October, and it was really cold, and it got frosty, and she said, oh, it's going to freeze to death. What should I do? I said, I'll just leave it for a day or two and see what happens. It didn't freeze to death, but it stayed in the garden for 3 nights. And the 4th night, the weather warmed up and the wind got up and away it went. Now, there was an influx into the country at this time. There were at least 2 in the southwest. There was one in Wales. There was one on a North Sea oil rig off the coast of Fife. So I think this is a genuine thing. I think it's a genuine migrant. So fantastic. Yeah. A lot of moths hitting the headlines in 2022. I'm sure you want to know what's happened to them last year. Do you remember Strobipalparacella, the big moth? Now, the farmers got really worked up about this because it was eating all their commercial beetroot. It was in all the farming magazines. And it got everywhere. We'd never seen this in the county before. And there was this huge influx. And we wondered where it had come from. We thought, is this just a big migrant influx? Or is it something happened to it genetically? And instead of being a coastal moth-eating sea beet, is it actually eating commercial beetroot? So what's happened this year? Well, nothing was heard of Strobipalparacella. Nothing on any of the news groups. So all the records came at the end of the year. And we did get records. So it has stayed on in the south and east of the county. Is this now part of our fauna? Will it carry on breeding? Will it carry on infesting beetroot? Who knows? I don't know what records there were to our south and east, but I'm not aware of any. There probably were. Do you remember treble brown spot? There was a first county record at Spurn. Very exciting. Well, this year we've had the second county record, and there it is. So this looks like it's going to gain a toehold and slowly advance. Do you remember dotted fanfoot? That turned up at Welwick Salt Marsh, just to the west of Spurn. Yeah, in Marston and Nunn got that, didn't they? So what's happened this year? Well, we've had 2 more turn up at Spurn, and that's one of them. So that's another species getting a toehold. We're going to see more of that one. Cyprus pug turned up in Harry Beaumont's moth trap at West Melton near Rotherham, didn't it? That's the first for the county. This year, 3 more. He's turned up at Spurn and at North Ferriby, and it's turned up all the way up the coast at Flamborough. That's the Spurn one. Lovely looking moth, isn't it? People don't like pugs, but you can't help liking Cyprus pug. So you may well see this, especially if you live in the south and the east of the county. So don't grub out your Leylandii hedge yet, and so ignore the neighbour for telling you to do that. It's got a purpose. Do you remember Saltmore Seraphim? Had turned up in BC 62, the first in the county since Porritt. Well, we've had 4 records of 6 moths in the same area. Those 2 dots are in fact the same site. So this is a proper population we've got in the county. Does it occur anywhere else? Who knows? This one, Caloptilia honoratella, this is a fairly new thing into the country. That was a map up to 21. 22, we had it in VC 61 and 63 in the very south. What's happened this year? More records in the south, but Robert Woods up here has had it in his garden at Gisborough. So this thing can occur anywhere. Now, this thing forms larval cones on Acer species, so field maple and sycamore. This is why we can't accept records of cones without breeding them out. The early mine is apparently more diagnostic, but the cone isn't. Not everything did well, of course. Some species did appallingly badly. Some things we didn't get any records of at all. We always get the odd record of lesser cream wave, particularly in the south and east of the county. We always get records of red carpet in the west of BC 64 and 65. Wood carpet usually turns up in the south and east of BC 63, and pretty chalk carpet always turns up at Brockerdale. Okay, it's its only sign, but there's plenty of trapping in Brockerdale, and it just didn't turn up this year. Of course, it's a July flyer, isn't it? So perhaps it was the July effect. I don't know. Bilberry pug's been doing well. I expected to see more records, and there weren't. Unless a spotted pinion always turns up down the magnesium limestone belt somewhere, or it turns up at Spur. But no records of that. Yarrow pug's been doing well in the south of VC63. None of those. And purple bordered gold, we always get the odd record from Thornmore, don't we? But none of those. Some records, oh, and wormwood as well. Wormwood is, we keep thinking that's extinct in the county and none turns up, but none again this year. Some records did spectacularly badly. Now, these are derived by looking at the previous 5 years, average amount, working out what we should expect in an average year, so you compensate for recorder effort. So if a species decreased by 75%, that is a huge decrease in antler moths. Now, buff arches was mentioned in a lot of news groups, and people in other parts of the country were saying, where are buff arches this year? This was the first year ever that I did not record a single buff arches in my garden. I normally get quite a lot. That's a huge decrease. Some of these things we know are decreasing, like dusky lemon sallow, and dot's been doing badly for a while, hasn't it? But some moths just didn't put in appearance. Several people commented that dark marble carpets just weren't about this year. So this is a lot of moths doing really badly, and a lot of them are flying in July or sometimes into August, and it could well be a larval effect from what I was discussing before. I thought I'd mention the carbonaria form of pepper moth. This, of course, used to be, before the Clean Air Act, by far the dominant form of pepper moth. When I started moth trapping 20 years ago, 5 to 10% of peppered moths were the carbonaria form. This year, I thought I was going to report that there wasn't a single one, but there was just one record of carbonaria this year. It's almost disappeared. What's one out of 700 records peppered moth? Natural selection can work pretty fast at times, can't it? Lots of other highlights. Lunar spotted pinion is a funny moth. It turns up at Spur now and again. I can cope with that. It turned up at Alwoodley. Paul Morris got in his trap in Alwoodley, the north end of Leeds. Where on earth does that come from? It's not a migrant. It didn't come with a southerly winds or anything. It turns up in odd places. These two records from Scarborough. We may have the odd breeding colony dotted around the county in places, in bits of woodland that we don't know. It's an interesting moth, this one. And talking about odd bits of woodland, oak lutestring is another of these Morecambe Bay species that comes across, isn't it? This record here, Mark Brake's got this near Clitheroe a few years ago. That was our last record. But we have old records. Buttercrab Wood, 1944, this one. This turned up at Pretty Wood. Now, Alistair Fitter and his friends have been trapping odd bits of woodland. This is to the south and east of Castle Howard. Nobody's ever trapped there before. And he trapped and he got satin lutestring, which is great. But he got oak lutestring. Could you believe it? What on earth is that doing there? It does make you think. I mean, this record here at Buttercrab is not far from Pretty Wood. Pretty Wood's about there. It could be that there's been a colony there all the time, undetected. And this shows the value of trapping in places where nobody's ever trapped before. There are things to discover in this county that we really do not know. I don't know if four-dotted footman is a migrant or a resident. We used to say it's a migrant, and they used to be migrants, but the situation's really confused. Remember last year, Ingleton again, John got 3, didn't he, in his trap, and that spilled over from the Morecambe Bay population. But what about these? This has turned up at Askham Bog for the first time since 1880s, and one at Low Dolby up here. I don't know where they come from, but I strongly suspect that this beast is actually resident in the county. And like a lot of footmen doing well, I'm rather hoping this one we might see a bit more of. Willow ermine, again, look at that graph. That's virtually an exponential rise, 350 records of a moth that's not easy to identify. And it comes in waves. You think, oh, these are migrant surges, aren't they? But it's not as simple as that, because there are at least 3 records of larval webs this year. And I think this is pretty well resident in the county now. More and more people are recognising it. More and more people found it for the first time this year. Black arches, numbers have shot up, 27 records of black arches. This has not really increased its range, but it's turning up in new places and a lot of old places too. So it's doing very well. I thought I'd show this map on our tetrad level. Uh, Sam Newton's been doing larval surveys for small egger webs for this is the 5th year. Now, this year, I think has been really interesting. We know this core area in the Malton Pickering area. It's been forever. We know about this, but he's found records on the far side of the Derwent. This black line, of course, the Vice County boundary is the River Derwent. 3 records on the far side of the Derwent. If you don't look for it, you don't find it. Where else does it occur? These grave records are old, ancient records, so ignore those. But this here is from 2008 when Terry Crawford got an adult in his trap. Very few adults have been seen because it flies so early. It's a February flight, isn't it? But look at this. These dots here is a huge extension of the known range. Well, huge when it comes to small egger. And you only have to go down 2 more tetrads there, and you're at Strensel Common. This may be a bigger area than we think. If you don't look at the peripheries, you don't find. And it could occur in other places. All sorts of other highlights. God, I could have gone all night about highlights. Dotted Chester, the 3rd and 4th county records. That's one Alan Rodder got at Wycombe. They're on the right one. It's got at Rossington. Of course, this thing is on the wing now. I'd love to see it. We're going to see more. Yellow leg clearwing we thought was quite unusual in the county, and it didn't occur in VC62. But if you start putting the pheromone up in Oakwoods in VC62, you found it. 3 separate sites. This thing is nowhere near as rare as we thought it was. Webb's wainscots turned up in VC65, not in my garden, alas, but some new moth trappers at Great Smeaton, bless them, in the first year of moth trapping, they get that. Fabulous thing to get. And this is turning up everywhere. It's had a really good year. Small white wave, as we well know, is a moth of VC62. People find it dusking at night, just a very occasionally in the moth trap. You don't get 20 at light in VC61, do you? I mean, that's just plain ridiculous. But oh, yes, you do. Morby Far Wood, that's where the Kidia Ilutana was, of course, wasn't it? And Paul Fletcher's found this. It's the value of trapping in unknown sites. And that's a ridiculous record, but it's true. Lead-coloured pug occurs in areas with common cowwheat, open woodland with common cowwheat. There are few areas like that in the county, but this is a moth, hasn't been seen in the county for many years. And it's just because people don't look for it. Now, I went to Brimham and I chose the right night and the right weather, fair enough. But it was the commonest moth I saw, and 25 is an underestimate. I put dusking, but it's not dusking like you get lots of these bugs. This is before dusk. You should go an hour before dusk, but the sun's still up and it's sunny in June in the right habitat. Wave your net around. You don't need to wave your net around. They're all there. And it's a lovely little moth, and it must occur more widely across the county. Large thorn numbers. Well, large thorn just occurred at Easington. Spurn, didn't it? We got 2-3 records a year. It's spreading. It's spreading and it's slowly moving north. Pale Oak Beauty, more before wood again, but at Sheffield too. And this is increasing its range. That's the Sheffield one. I don't think you'd mistake it for the other beauties. Duix plusia. Is that a migrant? No, it's not a migrant. It's resident in the south and east. I'm quite certain about that. And now 3 sites in the south and east of the county. You're going to see more of that one. If you're looking for the next moth that's going to become resident, the next so-called migrant, it's L. album wainscot. That turns up at Spurn every now and again, but it's turned up at Flamborough, right up the coast. 3 records this year in total. Now, this is a thing that's meant to be coastal because it feeds on marram and things like that, but there are a lot of inland records. It will feed on inland grasses. And I strongly suspect we're going to see a lot more of these in years to come. And that's one from this year. You don't have to mistake that, are you? Tree lichen beauty records have shot up this year. The range hasn't. It's still confined to the south and east of the county. So interesting to see what happens with that one. And small brindled beauty, which is a moth that's just still on the wing now. It's a February flying thing. Hasn't been seen in the county since 2010. The reason being, people don't go and trap in nice oak woodland in February. But if you do, like your Trafford Asprey pastures, and well done, the chap that got this. Fantastic. First one in the county for a long time. The last thing I want to talk about is this thing, which many of you will never have heard of, Wattsonella uncinula, spiny hook tip. Now, this looks very similar, of course, to oak hook tip. It's been in the Channel Islands for a few years. And last year, if you read your ornithologist record, it was found at quite a few sites in the south of England, and it's heading in our direction. And I don't want you to miss it. Now, how do you know you've got that and not oak hook tip? It's not always easy. It's bigger, particularly the female is bigger. It's a purpley grey colour, which you can almost see on that top left-hand picture. It doesn't come across well on the photos, but people that have caught it say it's a different colour. It's just a third generation. So if you catch an oak hook tip in October, be wary. The things you're meant to look out for, which people go on about, is this white cloud above the dark mark at the apex of the wing. Now, oak hook tip has got a palish area there, but in spiny hook tip, it's much more pronounced. And the dots in oak hook tip, they're big, bold, brash dots, aren't they? In spiny hook tip, they're smaller, more understated dots. There are other things out there which might make you think you've got spiny hook tip. In the oak hook tip, this bulge in the anti-median line is a bit more pronounced usually. And this line of dots outside the post-median line is a bit more well marked, though you can get these in spiny hook tip. It's not diagnostic, but that's just one to be aware of. Don't miss it. Finally, the website, it's been updated with all your records, all the ones I got in until the middle of January. Late records will be updated in March. And so, as you can see, last updated 22nd of January, 207,000 records there. There's a few more to go. Well, I've gone on nearly an hour, haven't I? So I think that's probably enough. So it's probably time for me to shut up.
Charlie, thank you very much. Fascinating as always, and great to hear so many wonderful stories about the moths that have been recorded by so many wonderful recorders we have, fortunately available to us in Yorkshire for